Our next session is a panel discussion that will take the bidirectionality of the process of trying to study the impact of AI and education to the other side and ask the question, what do educators need from AI? The moderator of this panel will be our friend Kleiman, who is the senior advisor to the Accelerator, and he will introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Ahmed. Hello, everybody. Great to see everybody here. We've been planning this for a long time. It's so nice that it's happening now. I'll go very quickly because we have a wonderful panel to follow the first wonderful panel. I think the two will converge in some very interesting ways. I'm very pleased to have with us Amanda Bickerstaff, who's the founder, co-founder, I guess, and CEO of All for Education. With Keith Krueger, who's the CEO and founder of the Consortium for School Networking, known as CoSN. Victor Lee, Associate Professor of Education here at Stanford, and also the faculty lead for AI in the Accelerator for Learning. And Pat Yongpradit, who's the Chief Academic Officer of Code.org, and also the lead for the Teach AI initiative, consortium, bringing together many, many different groups to work on these issues. It's wonderful to have these folks here because these folks are everywhere. Everywhere people are talking about AI in education, all four of these folks seem to be present and having enormous influence helping educators prepare to make informed decisions about AI. There's so much change, so much going on, as you all know. And whether it's a teacher or a school leader or a district leader or state legislators, they're all trying to figure out, what does AI mean? What is it? How should we be using it? How should we be preparing to use it? How does it change what we teach and learn? And these folks are all key nodes in that network and having tremendous influence on all those folks out in the schools. And with that, I'll just turn it over to them to begin their short presentations. Then we'll have some discussion among the panelists and some Q&A. And again, you can put your questions in. And Amanda will be starting us off.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. How's everybody doing? We're excited. We're going to have a lot of talk about educator perspectives, and I'm really focused on the educator side of things, so I'm really glad to be able to do this. The name of my little micro talk is Where Teachers Are and What They Need. If you're on LinkedIn, you probably think that everyone is an expert prompt engineer, that we all have GPT-4, and we know exactly what's happening. And I'm here to, unfortunately, blow that up and say that we are still at the incredibly early stages of what this means. So I'm very lucky at AI for Education. I have probably trained about 35,000 teachers directly on generative AI, just 3,000 in the last week. And what I see is that every room, there's an amazing disparity between never use it all the time. And so, for example, this was out in Ed Week, 500 educators in December, and only 2% had used it a lot. Fully 2/3 of those educators had never used a generative AI tool of any kind. So this room, you guys are early adopters, most likely. You're going to be on the front edge of this work, but schools are far behind. And so it's really important for us to understand that. When we talk about what educators need, it is a lot more than we think. So here's what I see in every single room I'm in. There is a lot of fear and uncertainty. Nearly half of teachers said they were uncomfortable with generative AI. And I will say that that tends to be even higher in, let's say, an elementary school. Or if you're an English language arts teacher in this room or have been, you're pretty upset. And so there's a lot of people that are really afraid of what happens. And what is this going to mean for student learning, as well as the idea of AI is only for cheating. And I know we're going to talk about that later today in our talk, but I think we have to understand just where our educators are. This is the fastest consumer-facing technology of all time. And it means that we all, while we might all not use AI, we all have an opinion about AI. And a lot of those opinions in education are pretty negative. But at the other end, I've been in education for 20 years. I have never seen people so open to learning. I cannot tell you, I've never had a hard room, ever. We start with talking about uncertainty, we talk about demystifying what the technology is and isn't, and then we show what it can mean for them. And so when we talk about what we think we should do, what educators need, is we do not need a whole bunch of AI expert teachers. Teachers should be experts at teaching, and they should be augmented by technology to help them teach better. We should not expect them to be able to keep up with something that I promise you not everyone in this room is, and we have time for it. And so it's really important for us to focus on two things, and that's building capacity about what these tools are, aren't, and how they can help, but also finding value. How can this make school better for once? School has not gotten better for a really long time, and this is an opportunity to do that almost immediately. So what we focus on are 5 key areas. And the first is comprehensive AI literacy training. And I say this in the sense of not just for educators, but for leaders, for community members, and definitely for students. This is incredibly important. And when I say AI literacy, I am talking about AI, but really specifically generative AI. We need to be discussing what these tools are or not. If I ask this room, is AI thinking? What would you say? There are rooms of teachers that say 50% will say yes. 50%. And sometimes it's only 2 to 10 people, but sometimes it's a full half room. So there's a lot of misconceptions about what artificial intelligence is. And that happens because OpenAI put something into the world that was conversational, that you say hello to. Are you a person that says please and thank you? I am sometimes. This is an opportunity where the UX and the way it was put into the world really makes people think about these tools differently. It also makes us fall asleep at the wheel, where we tend to look at it and believe it's true. And what do we know about these tools? They mess up a lot. And while I hate the term hallucination, it is something where those inaccuracies really are hard to find, but they're ever present. So that's really important for us to understand. So teaching about AI literacy is really, really important. What are these tools? What are they not? What are the capabilities? And what are the limitations? That's number 1. Number 2 is we do not need to throw 1,000 tools at teachers. Here are 500 differentiation tools. And you're going to make worksheets better and faster. We do not need that. But what we need to see is job-embedded applications. And so I love the presentation before, but what are the things that teachers spend the most time on? Planning, grading, and talking to parents, okay, depending on where you are. And so the idea of actually building applications that work within the workflow of a teacher and actually augment and help them save time, build better materials, do more with what they have is really important. The third piece, and I know that Keith is going to talk about this, is strong guidance on responsible use. And so people are waiting for someone to say, this is what responsible use means. And you talk about that fear and uncertainty. If you could do that, it brings down that level almost immediately. So are we saying, are there opportunities for students to use these tools in a responsible way? Are we rethinking those opportunities? Or are we just saying it's banned? Because I'm going to tell you right now, that is impossible. It was impossible when ChatGPT came out. It's even more impossible now that generative AI tools are in every part of our lives and will continue to be more a part of our lives and technology, not less. The fourth piece is safe and reliable tools for students, and I'm going to add something to that. Also cost effective. These tools are incredibly expensive, which we know, and there are really a lot of opportunities for schools that are ready to do this work, or districts and teachers, that they don't have a place to go because they do not feel like these tools are safe yet, and I have to say, I don't think they are either. And then the last piece is, let's give space for innovation. We don't want to reinforce bad practice or existing practice. We have had a model for over 100 years that we haven't changed a lot, and we know that doesn't work. So this is a place, and actually creating a place for innovation, experimentation. So we are not just building better worksheets, but we're starting to think about what education can become. So thank you guys so much.
All right. Yes. So my name is Pat Yongpradit. I'm Code.org's Chief Academic Officer and the lead of Teach AI. Teach AI is an initiative dedicated to guiding education leaders and policymakers in rethinking education in an age of AI by connecting the discussion of teaching with AI, like the ed tech side of things, to teaching about AI, just how it works, the ethical and social impacts. Teach AI is led by a steering committee of Code.org, ETS, ISTE, Khan Academy, and the World Economic Forum. And these lovely people up here are on Teach AI's advisory committee, including many of you in the room. So thank you for your feedback, your guidance, your wisdom, and your contributions. It means a lot to our work. So like many of you all, I spend a lot of time talking about AI in education these days. But I used to be a computer science teacher. And so Amanda kicked it up really well. She talked about just educators as a whole. I'm going to focus on computer science educators for 2 big reasons. Number 1, in an age of AI, computer science is foundational. And if you don't even care about AI and your thing is like robotics or data science or cybersecurity or even quantum, guess what? Computer science is a foundation for that as well. Now, you're looking at this, you're thinking, yeah, sure, okay, this makes sense. Here's the problem in the US. Only a little over half of our US public high schools even offer one single computer science course in 2023. 7 years ago when we started measuring this, it was 35%. So this is a big problem for computer science education. And so I want to answer the question, how can AI serve computer science educators and serve the aims of the CS education community? First, AI can make computer science more approachable, accessible, and interdisciplinary. Now, you can just replace CS with some other subject as well, science, mathematics, etc. So all of my remarks are going to, you can extrapolate them to other areas, but obviously I'm going to focus on CS for a specific context. It can be more approachable. Since punch cards, remember those? Some of us remember those. I don't remember those. But I remember the Apple IIe. So from punch cards to assembly to modern programming languages to block-based coding to now AI code generators, programming machines has always been on a track towards becoming more user-friendly. And now with Gen AI coding tools that can help you write the code, evaluate it, debug it, understand it, you have systems that are way more approachable for the broad swath of teachers and students out there. Even more, it's not just about the CS classroom anymore. English teachers, social studies teachers can now use these very same tools, and now creating a program can be a viable opportunity for demonstrating competency, the same as create a PowerPoint, write an essay, draw a poster. Even more so, CS with AI can become more accessible. I have a friend of mine who works at the Maryland School for the Blind, and she tells me how awesome her kids are, but how much they hate these clunky interfaces they have to use. And it's such a drudge just to code the simplest program for these super amazing students. Now, obviously, we have to answer questions like, if we use these AI tools, do we lose something from the learning process? And what do we emphasize and de-emphasize in an age of AI? Second, AI can usher in a new era for computational thinking. And we can move away from just getting a program to work to the bigger ideas of computing. And this is the same for many, many fields. This is computational thinking has always been a funny thing and hard to kind of codify. But I see AI providing a new era for computational thinking and focusing on it. And then third, AI can expand and support assessment of the learning process. I think one of the folks from the first session mentioned this as well. And this is super important. There's this whole Invite AI Institute that's trying to study how you can measure non-cognitive things like resilience, collaboration, persistence. And by the way, these are some of the things that computer science folks feel like are probably some of the biggest benefits of learning to code. Because as we know, not everyone's going to become a software engineer. But as Victor is going to talk about after this, there might be some issues related to cheating. And he's going to expound on that. So these are all questions we still need to answer, even with all these opportunities. So how do you serve educators? You listen to and understand them. You align the tools and guidance to their existing goals. Don't create new goals for them. And you actively address their concerns in order to help them realize the benefits of AI. At Teach AI, we have a big roadmap. We released this AI Guidance for Schools toolkit. It's on a table out there. But we have a bunch of stuff happening. If you're interested in engaging in any of these activities, whether it's the Education and Industry Learning Series, where we're bringing together education leaders and solution providers, or this AI literacy framework, or this policy starter kit we're going to be launching in 2 or 3 months, or guidance on the future of CS education in the age of AI, please reach out. My email is very simple. If you saw my last name, you know it's long. Luckily, All you have to remember is pat@co.org, or just visit teachai.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. That's great. You reminded me that I spent a lot of time in graduate school on this campus walking from psychology to computer science to use a key punch machine. Anyway, Victor's up next. Thank you, Victor.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to do something very unusual for this, and it is going to be to speak without slides. I'm actually going to rely primarily on my charisma and self-deprecating humor, but I will warn you, I am not Wong. Everything I know I've learned from amazing teachers, and that applies very much to my job as an education researcher and an education professor, and as the faculty lead for AI and education for the Stanford Accelerator for Learning. And I want to make 3 points to talk about, especially in response to things that, from my conversations with teachers, educators, administrators, and other professionals who are working with and for the schools, have commented about or asked about. And I also want to speak primarily to, as a researcher, as somebody who's situated at Stanford University, what sort of thing can we do as a research and scholarly entity in relation to support this larger mission of making sure AI brings about the kind of future we want for our kids and for their kids as well. One of the things that I think we know researchers do is they collect and analyze data. And as Pat had mentioned, we have been doing some work on one of the biggest concerns that teachers and superintendents and principals and parents have expressed to us, and it's about cheating. So I've been really fortunate to have a wonderful colleague, Denise Pope, who is a lecturer at the Stanford Graduate School of Education and co-founder of Challenge Success. And Challenge Success is an organization that has worked closely with schools for over a decade and has been collecting data on student cheating and school climate during that time. So before the word ChatGPT even existed, they had data on cheating. And so when ChatGPT came about in November 2022, Denise and I had some quick conversations and thought, wow, here is a chance to see, did things change? And I will tell you the punchline quickly. They did not. The cheating levels have stayed the same. Now, there's a lot of nuance to that because, for one thing, cheating has, and this is consistently documented in research, not just from Stanford or Challenge Success, but across the board and across the decades, between 60 and 80% of students. So it's already high. And would think, oh no, AI was Pandora's box. We have unleashed chaos. That has not been the case from the data so far. There are also other nuances to that where, well, okay, plagiarism. We have not seen evidence of that yet from the survey data as having substantially or statistically significantly increased relative to when ChatGPT had come out. Students do want guidance, though. They have questions, and they have opinions on what this could be really useful for. And so I really applaud groups like Teach AI and AI for Education and others who are trying to bring about some of those conversations. And I want to make sure that we include students in those, and that's something I know that Denise and Challenge Success is very passionate about as well. Now, a second thing that we also do in research, and especially in education research, is combine research and design. So one of the projects that some people here are familiar with is the CRAFT project at Stanford, which is classroom-ready AI resources for teaching. And it has been an initiative that has been graciously supported by the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, HAI, Stanford Digital Education, and numerous students and staff. And our goal here is to be highly responsive to teachers who know that AI is the topic that we need to be focusing on, but they've been told for decades that there's many the topics to focus on. And so how do you fit that? How do you make that work? Well, there's not a lot of time in the school day. Teachers have tremendous wisdom and expertise from their day-to-day experiences, so the right thing to do is to co-design with teachers, to actually engage in the design process early and often and build the things that are going to help them address the topics in their disciplines. So that way, if you are an art teacher and you want to talk about the copyright issues that come with using DALL-E, or if you're an English language arts teacher and you want to talk about writing and how do we advance our work in writing and critical thinking, or if you want to talk about how AI is changing science. So it's been really heartening for me that for us as a research and development entity and based at a university, that a lot of these ideas that we help to amplify from teachers are being taken up and welcomed by many other organizations. And I also want to thank Pat and Teach AI for being so mindful to include Stanford in the conversations so that way we can help bring about the research and bring about these new models that I see appearing more and more, such as small modular lessons, co-designing with teachers, and making sure that things really speak to interdisciplinary concerns and try to minimize the additional overhead. Now, the last thing I want to talk about as far as what we do as academics and researchers and education researchers specifically is, we have the privilege to ask provocative questions. And I'm going to ask one provocative question about misinformation. Right now, it's an election year. We are justifiably concerned about misinformation. But misinformation is a lot more complicated than things that are being said that are untrue. In fact, a lot of the things that we like about generative AI is the stuff that it says that is untrue. If I want ChatGPT or Bard or any other chatbot tool to create a Shakespearean sonnet about Oliver Twist, which does not exist and is not what came out of the Bard's mouth, Google Bard, but not the Shakespeare Bard, we like that. That's fun. If I want to see some inspiration or have an example of fan fiction that integrates Percy Jackson and Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games series, that also doesn't exist. That's made up. We want that. And also, if, for instance, we want to write satire or make sort of clever jokes or comparisons, that is intentionally incorrect because it provides a form of commentary. So we're not necessarily, and what I'd say is the provocation for education and educator systems is to not focus so much on, well, the AI is producing the bad content. That's a really hard and complicated question to address. But what we are concerned about is how critically are we preparing ourselves and students and the general public to think about this. This is what we really want to be focusing on. We want them to take particular stances to understand where this sits in a larger, complex social context. And it's not going to be simply a matter of saying that's true and that's false, but rather how can I use this as one input to think deeply and contribute back. So as I said, as an education researcher, I'm really lucky. I get to talk with so many educators. We get to be invited to discussions, and some of the ideas that we put out there, people find interesting and take up. I'm really looking forward to having more conversations, but I think as a researcher, we can really play to our strengths and help support a really healthy and productive ecosystem full of industry and practitioners and nonprofits, and most importantly, educators. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. It's great in this panel and the prior panel how much the intersection between educators and researchers has developed in recent years. And we'll now turn things over to my good friend Keith.
Thanks, Glenn. It's great to be here. And if the last panel with Gay was saying that he's trying to answer questions that don't need to be answered, I'm going to bring the opposite part of the spectrum from the generative AI K-12, which is answers to people who are in charge who need to answer them. So we're the 30-year-old National Association for Chief Technology Officers, Heads of Technology in School Districts. I see Chris Hagel. Chris Stand, he's one of our members from Peninsula School District up in Washington. And I'm going to try to channel Chris and all the other leaders who are trying to figure out what the heck to do around generative AI on the front line every day to help their superintendents, help other cabinet leaders who are in charge of education and finance, what they should be doing. And obviously you all know this, but the World Economic Forum has said this isn't just one more technology. This is a transformative technology that is as important as steam 200 years ago was, or electricity was 100 years ago, or the internet has been for the last 40 years. So from my perspective, when we think about what chief technology officers have been doing since you last met a year ago, there's kind of been three general sort of ways. The first one to attempt to ban it, the chancellor of New York City immediately got out the gate last year about this time saying they're not going to allow it. He immediately, I would say perhaps 30% of school districts tried to do that. It was very unsuccessful. So we've been hearing a lot of school districts say that they're embracing it, including New York City has shifted when they announced with back to school that they would. But 1,000 flowers blooming doesn't necessarily make for a great garden. So the third is probably where most of our school districts are trying to figure out what the heck to do until it quiets down, which of course it isn't. Things are getting more and more intense. So as the Professional Association for Heads of Technology, we've been kind of like, well, what exactly should people do? So we think there are huge opportunities, not only in the classroom, but particularly in the operational side of schools. And we need to have policies that understand or at least guide teachers, principals, parents around what exactly we're doing. And so we have partnered with the Council of the Great City Schools and created, now this is version 1.0, but we brainstormed around what are the most important questions for school administrators to be thinking about. And we've come up with, there are 93 in this version 1.0, and they're organized, they're binary questions, yes, no. But sometimes even not being able to answer a question yes, no tells you where you might need to focus some attention. They're organized in 6 buckets. Executive leadership, so what policies at a school board, at a school district do you need to have? What readiness do you have in terms of purchasing and things like that? What data readiness, what technical readiness, security readiness, and legal management risk? So these are the sorts of questions that school administrators need to do. We also, as Pat has already alluded to, been partnering with the Teach AI folks and working on the AI guidance toolkit that came out this fall. We're very excited about that, and it's iterating now to a new set of resources for policymakers about things that they might be able to do. We have also not just since ChatGPT, but the last several years, been trying to help administrators think about what AI means in K-12. So there's a primer. We have a lot of one-pagers for superintendents on what is AI and what is not. So there's a whole lot of it. We're at a very early stage. I think Amanda started the discussion at the right place, and that is there's a lot of confusion about how to get started, and that's where we're trying to do. We've also been asking school leaders like Chris Hagel, what AI tools are you using? Now, we're vendor neutral. We don't endorse products and services, but we think it's helpful for other administrators and teachers and school leaders to see how people are starting to apply AI tools in their daily work, because that's where it's most productive. And I should say that for this effort on the AI readiness model, we're moving to a maturity model. So by this spring, at our conference, we will be issuing some, like where you would be at an early stage, an advancing stage, and a mature stage around AI in the classroom. And we also think that there's lots of things for our audience that they're going to be very interested in, the intersection of things like cybersecurity and AI, both the opportunity to better protect school systems, but also the risk that cyber criminals have AI, and that email that you get from the Prince of Nigeria is now actually going to be in the voice and video of your superintendent telling you to send all those W-2 forms. So the last thing I would just say is I'm really excited that Stanford and the research community is focusing on this. And I hope that you'll think about ways to connect with school leaders who are trying to solve real problems, not just the problems you're interested in. And we'd love to have you in Miami, along with Glenn and others, to explore that.
Great. Thank you, Keith, and thank you all. That's a great start, and you all kept pretty much within the time limit, which is great. So we have some time for discussion. There are so many questions. I will point out we have breakout sessions later this afternoon on equity and on responsible use and on large language models. And these folks, I believe, will be around for the day. So if you don't get your questions in now, hopefully you can grab them later on. I know they're all extremely friendly people, as you can tell. We have a couple of that just came in that also are similar to questions that we had prior to the session. So let me start with those. One reflects the idea that often when people think about AI and they talk about personalized learning, people get the image that this is for an individual student sitting at a computer. And the question reflects, how can AI be used to enhance collaborative learning, foster inclusivity, critical thinking, and a culture of shared learning?
I'm happy to take that on. So there are a lot of really great opportunities. The first is just pretty simple, of teachers having the ability to do more with the less time. So actually intentionally developing a material that encourages real-world examples, authentic assessment, having kids work together. There are also like vertical AI systems that are becoming more that are working on, and I think they'll be on market in the next couple years, which combine like classical AI and generative AI to create really unique learning environments. So for example, OCO Labs is a small learning piece that's supported where students sit around, they are on their computer, but they're actually collaborating around a math game, but each of their games is different and targeted to them. And so what it does is it encourages them to interact with each other, but also get what they need in that same zone of proximal development. And I think this is where it gets really interesting, is that intelligent tutoring by far has the best evidence base about what AI could be that goes before generative AI. But we really don't have that yet. There's no real intelligent tutoring system on the market. But what we are seeing is these opportunities to leverage existing technologies with generative AI to make it a little bit more fun and interesting or engaging and responsive, that we're going to see better opportunities through technology over the next couple years to do that, which is really exciting.
So intellectually identify as a cognitive scientist and a learning scientist. And in the field of learning sciences, there's a very important core message that we're continuing to say repeatedly, and it's that learning is fundamentally social. So I think there's wonderful cognitive tutors work, and that should certainly advance and proceed for personalization. But we also need to really look at the complexities of learning and teaching in groups and a whole range of conversational settings. And we also need to appreciate how complicated that can be. So I'm going to first give a shout out to my colleagues, Jenny Langer-Asuna and John Mitchell, who are leading one of our seed grants to actually do serious design sessions around collaborative learning and generative AI. And they've been enlisting students to get some great ideas and do some really good observational work. But to illustrate, for instance, imagine you have an AI voice assistant type thing that sits at the table and will help summarize or comment or make sure people aren't talking too much. But we need the AI to know when to speak up. And turn taking is a very challenging social phenomenon. In fact, not everybody has mastered it. So, and if you think about the chatbots, it knows to take its turn because we pressed enter. We don't press enter in social conversations. We had to listen. We had to read body position. We had to sort of figure out what the topics were. And so appreciating that complexity and knowing that there is really serious and hard and important research on things that may feel kind of mundane because we're all doing it, but it is still messy, such as the social nature of learning is going to be really key to doing that. So, obviously I'm a researcher. I would like to champion research. I think that's going to be a helpful tool in addition to the conversations with educators and real observations.
Well, I live in Washington, D.C., so I'll answer a question that I want to answer. So one of the things that I think is helpful for school systems is in the North Carolina new resource that they put out on AI, they provided a chart that school districts could use, which goes from bright red to bright green with yellow in the middle. And so at let's say bright red is, a teacher could make a decision, I'm not going to allow AI to be used in the classroom. Whereas, at the yellow area, it might be, well, you can use it, but only at the start of it, and nothing that you submit can actually use it. It's just and in the bright green, which says, use it and go. But I think helping teachers think about how you, what's the appropriate place. And I don't think that at the central office they're going to be able to put out a blanket. It's always bright green or always bright red.
Yep. I'm going to be a little real with y'all. Imagine the best AI tool that some group of Stanford researchers created to measure things like collaboration, resilience, persistence. They launch it out to the world on a very accessible website. Guess what? If schools don't value those things already, it's not going to get that much uptake. And the issue is that, as we know, schools value other things. And there's a number of other measures happening. And yet, teachers, wonderful teachers, care about those things, and they're trying it. And so they'll probably pick it up. But in the end, you won't see the transformation you expected from releasing this wonderful framework, tool, protocol, et cetera, et cetera. And so just, not to be pessimistic, because my work is to make sure that schools do care about that kind of thing. But the fact is that until they care about that kind of thing, uptake of the wonderful research and tools that you all are creating, it's not going to be that high, unfortunately.
We have so many questions. I'm trying to prioritize one, but one I think is very important, and a couple of people have raised this. There's so much concern these days with mental health of students and issues of depression and anxiety, and the fear that, of course, the technologies are really contributing to those in a very negative way. Do you see AI as a way it can be helpful in addressing student mental health issues?
I can go again. So Replica is has chatbots where students can interact, or people can interact and use it for any means. And they actually found that those that were using these tools often that had suicidal ideation thoughts, it actually came down 3% just through their interaction with a model on GPT-3. So not even the best model. And so there is some really interesting pieces where actually if you ask students and you look at the research, that students are not using AI all the time for schoolwork. They're using it for in character AI or Snapchat AI, Meta. They're talking to fake Kylie Jenner, which you know what, okay. But that they're actually using it because of social isolation. And we know through the first ever chatbot, Eliza, was a mental health chatbot. And so that's 1964, and it wasn't very good, and chatbots weren't very good until about a year ago. But I do think there's a really interesting juxtaposition between people trusting these chatbots and having these conversations that maybe they don't feel safe for. And we built a well-being tool in my last job in Australia that really found that students were more comfortable saying that, instead of raising their hand and say, I need help or I'm not sure, to be able to say that to a technology and know that someone was on the other side. So I think there's that part of it. But the things that we don't know is what does artificial intimacy mean to young people that are creating conceptions of the world? And there's a research article from Ofcom in the UK that shows that 40% of 7 to 12-year-olds have used Snapchat AI. And so we have a lot of these technologies that are already in the hands of young people, and I think there's an enormous amount of information that we need to glean, research needs to happen, using social media as an example of when we totally whiffed, where we just whiffed everyone. And so I think there's a lot of good work that's happening, Opportunity Labs, others that are looking at these questions and trying to find where the good and the bad can be intersect, but where we can start to really understand that.
I don't think there's an easy answer to this, but if you have been following the news, the Senate had a hearing yesterday with social media and some of the role that it may be contributing or is contributing to mental health and harm to young people, as well as people of all ages. And there's not going to be easy answers to this, and I don't want to try to sell any easy answers. AI is going to be a tool. Tools have positives and they have negatives. And there are some things that we know really well as humans, and that it is connection and everyone's responsibility to contribute. And that includes, the AI companies, it includes peers, it includes educators, it includes parents. And it's not going to be an easy answer, but I think that we need to make sure we don't look to AI as the panacea or the sole cause. It's part of the entire system in there, and we all have responsibility and accountabilities to address this, and it's truly important.
I completely agree, and I think too often it's framed as, is this new technology, AI, going to be good or bad? And that binary way. So it's what's more important, I think, for you in the audience and for administrators around and teachers is to how do we shape the AI in order to enhance better social well-being? And I think completely agree, it's not going to be an easy thing. It's as complicated as curing cancer. So there's going to be lots of nuanced, it works better in this situation or worse than that. But those are the right questions that this audience should be asking.
Glenn, you said that we can ask questions of each other. Okay, can I ask a question of each other? Okay, so I don't know how many solution providers are out there right now. I know some of y'all, I saw some of y'all out there, and I think that's wonderful. And I realized that, we're doing all this wonderful research, we're sharing these wonderful ideas, but the teacher in the classroom is ultimately going to interface with AI through an ed tech app of some sort. And obviously CoSN's doing a lot of work with administrators, making sure that they're safe and responsible apps. But I just realized coming out of COVID, with teacher shortages and all that, there's this huge burnout level. And so what's the teacher's biggest pain point? Time and energy. So therefore, they're going to use that as the number one factor in picking a tool, not its effectiveness at addressing maybe the mental health of their students, not even maybe academic performance, but just simply, I know I'm being pessimistic here, y'all, but like that's probably what they're going to be picking because that's what's right in front of them. And obviously we are going to try to do as much as we can to make sure that they pick the right things, but how do we combat reality? Like the fact, am I being too pessimistic? Is there something I'm not thinking about? Or, do we just have to just fight and hope for the best?
I'll be the optimistic.
Yeah.
Like I think absolutely. I mean, we see there's a lot of uptake on application layers that make it really easy. And I find this really funny thing where it's like, this would take me 45 minutes to build a rubric, and now it only takes me 2 minutes. But could it take me no minutes? Can it take no minutes? Almost immediately do our brains go, if this could do this so well, why can't it do all of it? And we want that cognitive offload to happen, whether we're a student or a teacher. And those tools that are designed on application layers that make it really easy are really, really attractive. These are the same teachers that will spend 3 hours on Teachers Pay Teachers going through every single lesson where it would take them an hour or less to write it. Because this is all about cognitive load. And we ask so much of our teachers right now. Schools are the hardest place they've ever been. And I just want to reiterate that. And so I think there's that component of it. But I do see every time I'm talking to a district, and we're very lucky, I get to do this work with districts, with schools, with leaders, with students, is that when we start to talk about what the possibility is in finding value, this transformational moment starts to be like, what could be possible? And it goes way beyond, oh, can I just do that better? But like, what does this mean? And I think if we give people, if we respect teachers as professionals, which we never do, they want school to be better for kids. And I don't want the pessimistic thing. Don't agree with that. And I find that such a hard rhetoric to talk to because it's not true. But we don't treat them as professionals, and then we get something back from them that isn't professional.
Yep.
Come on, people.
Yep.
Sorry, off my soapbox. But this is so important, though, and I think that I really do see, like I said, never had a hard room. This is like 50,000 people.
Yeah.
Like, it's not something small, but we have to be intentional, and we have to meet them where they are and create something that makes it better.
Yeah.
I will amend one thing, though, is I wouldn't stop at treating teachers as professionals. Just treat them as humans.
That too.
They're exhausted. And it's not fully their responsibility to handle the mental health of all the kids, but they can do what they can do, and we all have our parts to contribute to it. But yeah, we also do need to treat them as professionals.
You actually have all answered what was going to be the next question about how AI can help the crisis we have in the teaching profession. Let me get one more question in because we only have a minute or so left, though. A lot of AI, always this concept of optimization is there, and we often end up thinking about optimizing current practices within current goals. Looking down the road a little bit, where do you see fundamental changes in what students need to learn, how teaching can take place, how assessment can take place, as a result of the AI advances.
I touched on that with, to answer a question like that, you have to really focus. I think you have to focus specifically. And so obviously I'm focused on computer science as a computer science teacher in terms of figuring out what changes about what kids learn. And I'll just throw out one idea. Rather than writing code, it's more about reading and evaluating code. There you go. And you could apply that to writing essays as well.
I think that it moves from, and they talked about this morning, from product to process is really important. I think durable skills of the future will very much be around critical thinking. Like, we already know that there's so much research to show that people just really trust these tools. Actually being able to evaluate and know when to trust and when not to is going to be huge. And the idea of actually becoming an editor. I think if it is a 10,000 reps to be an expert, what we're most likely going to do is either like the first 100 steps or the last one, the last 100, or we'll be the ideation engine, or we'll be the editing, kind of refining final engine. And I think that that's going to be really interesting. It doesn't mean that the middle, like 908, oh God, it's making me do math. 9,800 isn't important, but I do think we're going to see like a really big shift into that moment where we're not going to do things like we do today. And while we tend to, like Amara's law is that we overestimate the impact of this technology in this moment in time, we underestimate the long-term impact. And I think that's really what we want to focus on is can we help to get to that long-term impact in a meaningful way?
And I think that's what we do need to look for. And I think also, at least I get lots of questions of, which is kind of what you're asking, is predict the future. And prediction is a really tricky thing. Even those who invented lots of the fundamental, Thomas Edison said the AC current will never be of any general use. We could all do all the inventors. But what we really need to focus on is not predicting the future, but inventing the future. So what is it we're trying to solve? And I think the questions you're asking is, how do we make it better for students and better for teachers? How do we make their mental health better? Those are the right questions of the moment. And the challenge for this audience is to figure out how we do that.
You could do it.
Great. I think that's a good conclusion. We are out of time, unfortunately. I hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as I have. I have the pleasure of continuing to talk with these folks, but they will be around, and try to grab them and continue the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.